When assessing recent news from the local media, uh, you know, um, the 1 quadrillion rupiah uh, scandal from Pertamina, or maybe um, the protests that has been amassed in like 32 provinces across the nation in the past few weeks. And it makes us think, makes a lot of us Indonesians think that only Indonesia has the potential to make such terrible policies uh, and realize such terrible conditions. Um, this is this fuels us to think that we as Indonesians are inherently inferior or somehow more fucked than other races or other nations in regards to how we manage our country and how we behave on a person-to-person basis, how politicians uh, uh, how politicians are so easily corruptible once they have access to funds, how they mismanage said funds, and etc. etc. We could go on, but one thing we must realize is that the view um, that Indonesia is inherently bad, that we as Indonesians are simply incapable of anything. Like there have been jokes about like bring the Dutch back into Indonesia, um, and other things like that. How that is inherently a flawed view. That Because Indonesia is not really unique in this aspect. This is what I like to call the sort of curse of resource-rich post-colonial states. Um as we all know, Indonesia has been colonized for a debated number of years, but the popular figure is 300 something years, which again it's debated. It's not a definite figure of 300 years, but we have been colonized by the Dutch. That's a fact. By the Japanese, etc., etc. Uh, and we are in fact a resource-rich nation. Uh, when we look into other examples of or other cases of similar countries around the world, uh, we could see a similar pattern emerging from countries that are resource rich, but has been previously colonized by external powers. Um, we could see what the colonial mindset actually uh, ingrains itself into the how we perform our cognitive tasks, how we think about things, how we perceive news, especially local news. Uh, Local news sort of treats every single thing. They cover every single aspect of everything. Uh, it treats these as like individual problems that and it's quite hard for us as the consumer to actually assess uh, the inherent flaw with the system. It bombards us with so much terrible information, with so much cases that we really can't uh, take the larger scope and actually assess the situation for what it is. It bounces us from one case to another. It's just an ineffective way to actually see what's actually systemically wrong with the country, what's the actual problem in how we run our country with yeah, Indonesia. So like Indonesian media in a sense, it prevents us from actually seeing what's systemically wrong. Um, but again, let's go back to the topic. under Dutch rule, Indonesia was simply uh, a place for the Dutch to access resources. When they first came, it was spices. Uh, so institutions were essentially simply designed to extract wealth, not to empower citizens, not to provide good well-being for neither the colonizers nor the Indonesian people themselves. It was simply to extract profit. You know, the VOC was a was a sort of mega corporation that was profit incentives that has profit incentives, uh, and therefore they didn't really build the system in which they ruled Indonesia with uh, to make the country prosper in any sort of way. It was just about money, just about profits. So um, after Indonesia gained independence in 1945, uh, no, like likewise in other states, we could see that the new government simply filled the place of the colonializer. Um, so let's jump to another country, say like Nauru. Nauru was like was colonialized, and after there was they were colonized, the government essentially exploited all the natural resources of the country, and after the resources was depleted, the country went bankrupt. No, like these countries like Kenya, Nigeria, Venezuela, which was very rich in oil, but the government simply uh, used their power not to empower their own people, but they took the place of the colonializer and just sort of yeah played the like colonialized their own citizens essentially. In Indonesia, especially, like centralized SOEs, like Pertamina, they very much are still in the system of like colonial monopolies, like the state oil under Dutch rule, or the VOC, which was centralized monopolies run by the state. Um, yeah, so there's still an interesting correlation between how we run our system nowadays to how it was built by the Dutch. Like the Dutch ruled the entire archipelago uh, using a centralized approach with so they had a center in Batavia, and they ruled every major city, every major island from a single place. That's the system that we still run today, and the profits from the resources extracted in Papua, the profits extracted from Borneo or Sumatra, it all flows to a single centralized point. Um, this prevents many things. This prevents local communities from actually getting power, from actually uh, being able to achieve independence in a sense. Although we are now independent, like we still basically performs everything as though we are still colonialized, just uh, by ourselves instead of external nations. Again, this is not something unique to Indonesia. Uh, this happens throughout various countries, especially those that are resource rich. After they are colonized, the new government simply takes up the system that has already been implemented by colonizers and simply fill themselves with locals. But the underlying system has not changed, and as a result, things that are characteristic of colonialism still is very much apparent in 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 the system after they have such countries have gained independence. simply because they did not really change the system, only changed who was in power. But yeah, it's not. Some Indonesians believe like this level of a country being messed up, it's something exclusive to Indonesia. Some way like such terrible things could only happen in Indonesia, and that's why they want to temporarily leave, or they want to go to another country to, because Indonesia is the only country that's this bad. No, that's simply wrong. Like it's a common pattern. Yeah. Like the question that we beg now is, if we look at the other states that has been also suffering in a similar way, post-colonial high resource states, how do they how do they fix that problem of their governments essentially colonializing their own people? It's something that we have to think about. And if we look at like like the problem itself, we usually blame Indonesians. Like, oh, Indonesians are inherently lazy, or we there's no like we're inherently dumb. Like, there's no big scientists coming from this part of the world. But obviously, this is like a very false uh, point of view. It's a damaging philosophy in a place like it hides what's actually wrong with the system, and places the blame on us civilians, us Indonesians as people, and not systemically as a nation with poor management. It, what we see in the effects of this is that we see certain figures, certain public figures, whether that be in government or not, as villains essentially. Yeah. So we see certain figures like those with seats in the DPR, or other figures of the such. We see them as villains, even though, like, I mean, yeah, they are corrupt in a way, but they're corrupt because the system itself is incompetent, not because they, as Indonesian people, is inherently terrible. Yeah, so like natural wealth in the form of maybe like oil, gas, nickel, gold, phosphates, and even like carbon credits. When talking about like countries like Kenya, it becomes sort of a curse. It makes rulers accountable mainly to resources. The nation itself is defined by resources, not defined by its people. It fuels corruption and patronage. And, it encourages short-term extraction over long-term development, which is exactly what we see in our nation today. When we look at other countries that are similar and have failed, like Nauru was in a similar condition, and when their independent government took over, all they did was essentially replace the colonizers. They extracted phosphate even faster, and it depleted. And look at Nauru now; it's basically inexistent. You know, like, and we need to. So what's like the bottom line for all this? No, we need to stop viewing ourselves as inherently incompetent. We should view the system as incompetent, not ourselves as Indonesian people. Because like countries that have succeeded, like Saudi Arabia, they're like they're also like a colonials. They have been colonized by the Ottoman, by the British, by whichever nation, but they have recuperated very nicely. Um, countries like countries of the such that have recuperated very nicely, the UAE, for example. Uh, No, we have to stop letting news cycles keep us trapped in case by case outrage. Be angry at single cases, but actually take blur the lens a little bit. Make let us see the bigger picture, block things out, see what's inherently wrong with the country. It's the task is not of sort of moral reform, but a structural reform. We as Indonesians are not inherently wrong. You know, uh, it's a form of post-colonial thinking that corrupts us. So we have to get rid of it.